Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my A29B for another Let's Get You Flying video. I'm just going to pause things here for a minute and talk a little bit about what we're going to do today, and also to remind you that this series is basically aimed at new players. And the idea is to show that with the free download of DCS and a free module that you can download, you can do an awful lot of flying, including today we're going to take a look at dropping bombs and firing rockets. Basic handling of the aircraft and installing the mod were covered in some earlier videos. You might want to go and check those out on my channel. Today we're going to talk about actually employing weapons for the first time. We're going to use iron or dumb bombs, and we're going to use 2.75-inch unguided rockets. So they're about the most basic weapons that you can use in DCS and that you can use in the A29. We're flying a specific mission today. This is one that I've made, and that is will be available on my Discord server if you want to go check it out. It involves using a bombing range that I have made and that I use very often with various different kinds of aircraft. So if you want to actually see the targets that I'm going to be using today, you'll have to actually download that mission and fly that one yourself, although the techniques that we're going to talk about here are going to be absolutely applicable anywhere you want to use them. So one of the features of this mission is that it has ammunition set to unlimited, which has the effect that every time we drop bombs or fire rockets, we will get a full reload. So that means that we won't have to come back and reload, so we can make multiple practice runs. So you will notice that when we're out on the range. So the plan for today is to talk about how to set the aircraft up so that you can drop the bombs and fire the rockets. And then we'll go out on the range and we'll just do some multiple runs on various targets. And we'll talk about the proper way of setting yourself up for the attack run, which is really probably the most important part. And then we'll talk about how to actually get rounds on target. So the very first thing that I want to do, though, is a little bit of a modification here in the cockpit. You'll notice that our HUD is a pretty simple HUD. It doesn't have the airspeed and altitude tapes on the sides. And I would like it to, and there's a way of fixing that in the A29. And I'm going to show it to you here in just a sec when I restart the video. One other point I want to make is that I did record this video in VR, so the pointer doesn't really line up with the buttons in the cockpit. So I'm going to show you what I'm pressing, but ignore the little yellow cross there. It's not actually recording at the right location. So the way to get the airspeed and altitude tapes to display on the HUD is first to press the VV key on the up front controller, and then take the little switch on the upper left of that and press it down, and then select the N cell key on the bottom right of the up front controller, and hey presto, we will have tapes on our HUD. Okay, we pressed VV, down, and select, and now we have tapes to the left and right of the HUD. Okay, so we're continuing out to the runway as we taxi by here. You can take a look at our loadout. So we're carrying a pair of Mark 82 slick bombs on the inner pylons and two 19 rocket pods on the outer pylons. And as I said, those will renew every time we drop them. So we have a pair of bombs and a pair of rocket pods. That's what we're going to be working with today. Now the A29 does support much more sophisticated weaponry, but we're not going to be talking about that in this video. So we're just going to continue our way out here to the runway. I'm going to do a rolling start today. Flaps are up. The only thing I need to do here is probably give myself a unit or so of back trim, which I like to do in the A29. It just gets us off the runway easily. So we're putting in the back trim now. Yeah, about 0.8, that looks good. And now we're just going to roll onto the runway and get ourselves started. So as we're heading down the runway here, let's just talk a little bit about the process of iron bombing, as I call it, because we're using unguided weapons today. Those of you who know my channel will know that it's a little bit of a specialty of mine. Okay, maybe it's a little bit of an obsession of mine. This is for no other reason than because it's interesting to me, and because when I started looking at how to do it, I found that there were some fairly simple things that you could do that a lot of people don't, that actually really improve your accuracy with iron bombs, whether you have computer assistance like we do in the A29 or not. So we're getting took off and getting our gear retracted here. And we'll get ourselves ready to head out to the range, which is just over to the right a few kilometers, but we'll climb out here first. So let's just talk about the process of iron bombing. The really most important thing about getting rounds on target when you're dropping unguided weapons is actually your approach and setting up your roll in properly. If you do that, then you'll end up having a nice smooth approach. And the important thing about the actual final dive to the target is to get it so that you're really not working the stick very hard. You need to be quiet on the stick, as I often say, when you're in your final dive, and that will improve your accuracy, whether you're using computer-assisted methods like we're going to today, or whether you're actually dropping unguided weapons. So if you want to know a lot more about iron bombing, definitely check out some of the playlists on my channel and some of the more advanced aircraft, particularly the A4. Today is going to be pretty simple, but if you follow these techniques, I think that fairly quickly you'll have success at actually getting rounds where you want them to go. So the range is just up here, just inbound from the coast. You'll see it in a minute. We're just I happen to know where it is, so I'm just going to get myself lined up on it here. It's somewhere near those two yellow patches there near the lake, just to the right of the lake. It's in that region there. So I'm going to get myself set up, and then let's talk a little bit about how to set the aircraft up. So I'm going to pause it here again for a second, talk about what we're actually doing. So we're going to go to our left-hand multifunction display, and we are going to press the SMS Stores Management System button, and that will bring up this screen. Once that's up, we're going to go back to the up-front controller, and we're going to press the air-to-ground A/G button, and that will make the screen active. So now if we go back down to this screen, you can see that our weapons are listed under our wings, and the upper left corner button shows 30 Lao 1, which means that our rockets are currently selected, and you can see there's kind of a dashed box around the rockets on the outer pylon. We don't want to use the rockets on our first runs, we want to use the bombs. So we're going to press that upper left button, and that is going to change the indication to 2 Mark 82, and the hashed box is going to move to the Mark 82. While we're there, we're also going to press the CCIP button, the second button in from the top left, and this is going to put us into continuously computed impact point mode, which is as opposed to manual mode. And this means that the computer is actually going to figure out where our bombs are going to land while we're pointed at the target. And all we have to do is put that point over the target and press the pickle button in order to drop the bomb successfully. And we're going to notice on the HUD that we have a CCIP indication, but we don't yet have any bomb drop symbology. And we'll take care of that here, because the next thing that we have to do is to change the mass button from safe to live. And hey presto, we now have a CCIP pipper on screen. So there's one final thing that we will have to do when we're ready to enter the range. We will have to flip up the red switch over the late arm button, and we will have to put it on from its current safe location, and that will allow us to drop bombs. You'll notice when we come back to the HUD here in a sec that the pipper is a circle with a cross in it. That means that we're not at a place where we can get the actual bomb drop location on screen. When we do, it will turn from the circle with the cross to the circle with the dot, but we will have to be diving towards the target so that the target is actually on our screen, and the CCIP pipper can show that. So the last thing that we're doing here, we're not actually going to do a bombing run right now. We're doing something that I call a trim run, which is a habit that I think is a good habit to have when you're going out and doing range work. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it when you're attacking live targets, although you should use some range practice to figure out how you want to set yourself up. And that is that you want to put the aircraft in a full power, slight dive, and then you want to adjust the trim such that if you take your hands off the stick, the aircraft basically stays where you have left it. This is really important so that when you're actually doing your dive bombing runs, you don't have to be holding the stick to keep the aircraft where you want to go, because any pressure on the stick can have an effect on your accuracy. So understanding what trim you want to be at to get the aircraft to perform the way you want it is important, and it's something you can learn to do when you're on the range, and then when you go out and do it live, you just set the trim that you've learned to use. Okay, so that's our trim run complete. Now let's go do our first target run. And so you can see we've flipped up the red cover and we have set the late arm switch to on. And now we are climbing out on the other side of the target. We're going to establish ourselves in a good climb, and then we're going to start turning to the left at about a 45-degree bank angle or so. The idea is we want to fly a circuit around the target. In the beginning, this is going to be a climbing turn. Once we've reached the altitude we want to be at, we'll level out, but we'll keep turning. Oh, we got our beacon lights here on here. That's going to be a distraction. Just a sec. Let's see if we can turn those off. So we can find the light switch down here, get those turned off. Okay, that should be better. Let's take a look. Yes, the light is off. Okay, for this first run, we're going to do a fairly shallow dive angle. We're going to start at about 5,000 feet. We're going to start a fair ways back from the target, probably back around the third or fourth field. So this will probably only be a 10 or 15 degree dive, so not too exciting. We're going to line up on that white hangar building that you see in the front of the little compound. So I'm just keeping that off my wing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around until a line drawn from that to me in the cockpit looks about right for the line that I want to roll in on. When I'm ready to roll in, I'm going to do some very specific things here. So right about there looks good. So I'm starting to roll in. I put the lift vector, meaning the top of the cockpit, over the target. I pull up, and I try to put my flight path vector, that little green blivet with the 3 lines, over the target. And I'm just going to hold it there, and then I'm going to move it a little bit beyond the target, and I'm just going to hold and wait for my CCIP pipper to appear. And it will, don't worry. There it is, and pickle. Now, because that was a shallow drop, we're fairly low, under 500 feet. Yes, we can even hear the bombs. We probably want to be higher than that the next time we drop, and but pretty good accuracy. Only 10 or 11 meters from the target. But as I said, that's probably lower than we want to be, and that's a function of having used a fairly shallow dive angle. So this time, we're going to take it up a little bit higher and move our roll-in point a little bit closer to the target and see if we can't drop the bombs from a slightly higher altitude. So, once again, we're just going around the target. Pretty much this whole time, I'm just keeping the target off my left wingtip, making sure I'm giving myself enough room, just kind of shaping the turn. So this time we're going to use the H-shaped building rather than going after that hangar again, because it's well on fire. So we're still climbing, and we're extending the turn a little bit to give ourselves a little bit more range away from the target before we turn back in. Okay, so it's getting close. We're up over 5,000 feet. I like to climb out at around 180 knots in the A29. So now we're going to start shaping our turn around. So we're picking up a little bit more altitude. We're going to come in a little bit closer this time. Maybe the boundary between the first and second fields there, something like that. Try and get a slightly higher dive angle so we can drop the bombs a little bit higher. Now, in combat, of course, the higher you can drop the bombs, the safer you're going to be when you do it. So part of the technique of iron bombing is not only learning to hit the target, but learning to hit it from altitude, which takes a little bit more practice. So we're shaping the turn in here, pulling the turn in a little tighter so we can get just a little closer to the target, waiting for our lines to line up. I'm kind of looking at the fence lines on the side there and waiting until they kind of look like they're pointing at me. And when they do, I'm going to roll in. I'm going to roll the top of the cockpit to the target all the way over to the top. I'm going to pull up and try to get that flight path vector on the target before I roll out there, and then get it lined up straight. And then once I'm lined up, I'm going to put the flight path vector beyond the target and just try to hold it in that spot. I'm really not touching the stick. Everything's very calm. We're waiting for the CCIP pipper to appear, and it will, and it does, and there we go. And that time we dropped at about 1,500 feet, and our dive angle was a little higher, and we got some pretty good results as well. I should note that the numbers that you're seeing in the upper right-hand corner there are provided by a script that comes as part of the mission. So if you download the mission, you'll automatically get those indications when you go out to the range. Okay, let's switch back to the SMS page here in preparation for switching to rockets in a minute. Let's continue to fly our pattern, though. Now, rockets will need a shallower approach than we did for bombs, so we won't go quite as high, and we'll start a little bit farther back. And I think I'll use the actual big circular target this time for the rockets. So let's get ourselves turned around here, because we've gotten fairly far south. And we'll get ready to come in with the rockets. So to switch to the rockets, we just press that upper left button. We get the 30 Lau indication, and our rockets are highlighted. You'll notice we have the RDY showing on the screen, and that's because we have the late arm switch set to armed. If it was safe, we would not have the RDY on screen. Okay. You'll also notice, as we're going around here, when I go back and look at the screen, you'll see that we now, instead of having a CCIP pipper, we just have a circle with a cross in the middle, and this is the rocket aiming reticle. Now, an important thing to notice about the rocket aiming reticle is that it is not range dependent. So it is not being calibrated by how far away you are from the target. This matters with rockets because the 2.75-inch rockets are actually very short-range rockets. And that means that you're going to have to be very close to the target, much closer than you think you should be, in order for the rockets to go to the center of that pipper. And I'll show you that on the next run. If you start too early, you will end up with the rockets dropping below the pipper. Now, you can learn to calibrate that and fire from slightly farther away if you like, but the fact of the matter is, if you want to use 2.75-inch rockets, it really is an up-close and personal kind of experience. Okay, we're shaping ourselves around here. As you can see, we're a little bit farther back. We're a little bit lower. And it's the same process, though. We wait for the line from the target to us, to basically the line we want to approach, and we wait till it's pointing at the cockpit, more or less. And same procedure on roll-in. We're going to put the top of the cockpit on the target. We're going to pull up until our flight path vector is over the target, and then we're going to line ourselves up. And then we're just going to pull the flight path vector a little bit beyond the target to try and keep the rocket reticle on the target. But you're going to see when I start opening up here, these rockets are falling well short of the target. You can see that from the numbers as well. Now they start to get more accurate as I get closer to the target. But you can see that we're, down to 1,000 feet or so before we're actually in range of the target. Now, obviously, you could make that altitude a little higher if you dive a little steeper, but then you get less of the kind of strafing effect. So really, you need to figure out what works for you. Again, the whole point is that if you are actually deploying these weapons in a denied environment, as the saying goes, meaning there's somebody down there shooting at you, the higher you are, the safer you're going to be. Okay, well, that was figuring out how to fire rockets in pairs, and you can see we kind of strafed with them. Now we're going to press the RP01 button to give us a chance to change the size of the release, as it is called, the release pulse. We're going to change that from 1 to 7. And we are going to go back, and now you can see that we are going to fire 7 rockets from each rocket pod every time we press the pickle button. So once again, we're shaping ourselves around the target. So let's take a slightly steeper dive angle this time. We'll roll in around the same point, probably around the 3rd field back there, but let's get a little higher this time. See if we can get a little bit more of a dive angle. So we're a little bit higher, and maybe also the rockets be a little less sensitive to falling below the target the higher we go. So we're just keeping the target off the wingtip. Right now I'm kind of scanning. I'm watching the wingtip for the target, and I'm watching my roll-in point, which is sort of that 3rd field back, and I'm just trying to get to there at about the time that the target is, I'm on the line to line up with the target. So just kind of adjusting the rate of turn to try and make that happen. We're continuing to climb, so we're going to get a little bit higher this time. Get around the same amount of time to line up on the target, but we'll be going a little bit faster, higher dive angle, and hopefully that'll improve our accuracy as well. So now I'm starting to tighten up the turn as I get pretty close to where I want to be, tightening it down, watching the target, waiting for that line to point straight at me in the cockpit. Right about there. And now we're rolling in, and we put the top of the cockpit over the target, and we pull up. And we are going to try and roll out with the flight path vector as close as we can over the target. Then we're going to move the flight path vector up above the target, leaving the rocket reticle where we want it to be, right about there. And now we're just going to wait. And we're going to keep waiting. Not going to go early this time. We're going to make sure we're good and close to the target. And there we go. And much better results. And once again, the pullout's under 1,000 feet. We launched it between 1,000 and 1,500. But I think those were pretty good results. So that was 7 rockets aside, which is basically 1/3 of a pod. Now let's just change it up this time and let's do the full pod. So we'll do 19 rockets per pulse this time. Just change it to 19 and press enter. And now we're going to fire everything when we press the button. It all looks good. So let's go back up here, and we got to start gaining altitude again, shape our turnaround, and start thinking about how we're going to run in. So this time, rather than aim at any one of the actual targets, I'm going to aim at, there's a little vehicle park that is next to the white hangar. It's hard to see from here. I know it's there. It's full of M113 APCs. So we're actually going to fire the rockets at them and see what kind of damage we can do. So it's just off, when we're approaching the target, it'll be off the left end, so the west end of the building. So we got a ways to go here. Once again, we want to climb back to altitude, keeping the target off our left wingtip. So this is what we do at the range when we're going round and round in circles. But the fact of the matter is that if you were actually approaching a real target, you would probably want to use as much of the same kind of approach as you can, depending on what the area is like and what the opposition is like. But approaching the target essentially from the direction opposite of the one that you want to drop the bombs from is not actually bad practice. So you can take a look at the target, you can understand how you want to do your ingress and your egress, get all that set up in your mind, you can pick your roll-in point, and then you basically fly a circle around the target at around the range, hopefully the range outside of their anti-aircraft weaponry, which for something like the A-29 light attack, you're probably just talking about light AAA, so you're probably okay. If you've got somebody down there with IR missiles, it might be slightly different. But that's not usually the kind of environment you're going to be in with the A-29, so we're probably okay. So as you can see, we're just picking our point here. We're coming around the target. Once again, our target is off the left-hand end of the white building at the front of the compound there. You can see that black smudge. That's a bunch of vehicles. And we're just shaping ourselves around, getting a good amount of height here, so we can get a pretty good dive angle at that. And now we're starting to tighten it up because we're around the range we want to be. Don't want to get any farther out. And waiting for that line to point at the cockpit. Right around there. We're going to roll the top of the cockpit to the target. We're going to pull until we can put the flight path vector over the target. Not going to worry about the reticle at this point. We're just looking at the flight path vector. Get it up to the target. Then get yourself finally lined up. Then pull it slightly beyond so the reticle's on the target. And now, as much as possible, leave the stick alone. Leave the stick alone. Don't go too early. Leave the stick alone. Oops. I think I might have... yep, that's not really what we wanted. So basically the problem there was that I just went too early. I just got excited and forgot to hold my fire that extra 2 seconds that you need to with the 2.75. So I'm not really happy with that result. I think maybe I'd like to do that again. So we're going to go around here, and I'm just looking back. Yeah, I see we hit the fence. We did not hit the vehicles. Okay, not good. No, we don't have to change anything in our weapons. It's going to stay with full salvo. And we just need to shape ourselves around here, and this time we need to remember to keep our finger off the trigger until we're a little bit closer to the target. So, same thing, we're pulling up and around, gaining height. We're going a little bit farther south here because we still have some height to gain. And then we'll start shaping the turn around, keeping the target off the wing. So if the target's behind the wing, you're getting farther away from it. If the target's in front of the wing, you're getting closer to it. So we're still trying to build our range a little because we need to get more altitude here. And then we'll, looking pretty good. We're all set. Okay, let's pull ourselves around here. And we're not going to be quite as high this time. Well, we'll see how high we get. Pretty good range. I think that's going to still be a decent dive angle. The big trick is we just got to wait to pull the trigger until we're a lot closer to the target. Okay, final roll in. We're going to put the top of the cockpit on the target. We're going to pull the flight path vector up the target. We're not worrying about the reticle at this point. We just want to get the flight path vector there. It wasn't a great rollout. Okay, get the flight path vector stabilized just there on the target. Then we can pull the reticle up to the target. Very small movements of the stick. Gonna hold the reticle there and hold and hold. And there we go. And that was better. Really do have to be patient when you're firing the 2.75 inch rockets. They really want you to be a lot closer to the target than you think you want to be. Okay, I think that was a better result, seeing some destroyed messages there in the bottom right. So I think we had more success hitting the target. I think we're done for the day, so we have now safed our weapons. Let's come around here and get one more look at the target. Oh, that looks like a fairly acceptable level of destruction there. So we've obviously hit a number of those vehicles with the rockets. It's a good thing we sent 38 rockets down there. You can also see the damage we did to the fence on the run before that. Yeah, so that is how to use iron bombs and how to use unguided rockets in the A-29B. I think you'll agree it is not that complicated. It is something that takes a bit of practice. A lot of the stuff that I was doing today, you do need to bear in mind that I have probably done hundreds of times. And it's why I like working on the range, so I can get lots of practice and get good at it. That's how it works for me. The range is available if you want to practice your skills there. Or there are actually lots of missions on my channel if you just want to go ahead, jump in, and start putting some warheads on foreheads. Either way, the important thing is to enjoy yourself, and I'm having a good time doing a wing over here and heading back down to the target. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Please like and subscribe if you did. And for now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.